Quick, think of 5 war crimes as fast as possible. Ready? Alright. Perhaps you thought of attacking healthcare personnel. Maybe attacking civilians? Killing wounded prisoners? Maybe using illegal methods to transport weapons? Well, all of these and more are possible in the exciting world of hospital ships. Hospital ship. Noun. A ship which functions as a hospital, especially to receive or take home sick or wounded military personnel. The hospital ship is a novel concept, throwing a doctor's office onto the waves to tend to the many wounded men who boldly serve their country. The International Red Cross is one of the most admired organizations in the world, and their emblem has been a universal symbol of healthcare and neutrality for centuries. Throughout industrial history, their actions have certainly saved millions, and to this day, they haven't strayed from doing so. While researching for my Britannic video, I discovered the origin of not only the Red Cross, but also hospital ships in general, and summed it up by briefly saying some conference in the 1800s. Although not inaccurate, now's my chance to elaborate on these beautiful floating palaces of rubbing alcohol and band-aids. So let us begin. The first hospital ship we have the name of is the ancient Greek vessel Therapia, serving the sick soldiers of the city of Athens during the Peloponnesian Wars. As the saying goes, when in Rome, copy the Greeks. So the Romans built their own hospital ship called the... oh lordy, Aesculapius, yeah. The ship was named for the Roman god of medicine, who bore the staff that became this symbol. Jumping around a bit, in 1608, those lovely lads over in England built the first hospital ship we know anything about, called the Goodwill. It wasn't a purpose-built hospital ship, but we know that on voyages to the Mediterranean and Caribbean, it housed the sick of the flotilla to and from their destination. But it was more likely it only transported the sick than actually providing medical service to them. It sort of counts. The first 2 dedicated hospital ships were converted British merchant vessels and housed a surgeon with 4 assistants, coming about in the 1600s. Life was apparently just horrible on board, however, as were the rations, which one sailor brilliantly described for us. The hardtack biscuits were loaded with weevils, the meat was spoiled, and the bread was so dense that it stripped the skin off of people's mouths. It really doesn't sound like British food has changed much in 400 years. The British had 2 more ships in the 1680s called the Unity and the Welcome, which were used to evacuate civilians and wounded soldiers from the city of Tangier, one of the first examples of them being used for genuine hospital ship duties. The British government formally and legally acknowledged hospital ships by setting the first standards that each hospital ship must carry 5 nurses, 6 surgeon assistants, and 4 washerwomen for some reason. Throughout the 1700s, a major shift occurred in the use of hospital ships, as they went from being used to transport the sick and wounded to actually treating them. This shift coincided with the rapid advancement of medical technology through the late 1700s to the early 1900s. In 1821, the Seamen's Hospital Society was given 3 ships to convert into hospital ships. The HMS Grampus, no not that one, the HMS Dreadnought, no not that one, and the HMS Caledonia, also not that one. The 1850s saw the Crimean War, the world war everyone forgot about. This was the first large-scale use of hospital ships. 15,000 wounded soldiers were carried about all by ship. However, this still displays that these ships were primarily used for transportation and not treatment. Now, the Crimean War was the first major war to strike Europe since the days of Napoleon, and the bloodshed shocked this guy so badly that he decided to hold the first Geneva Convention to try and establish some rules of war. The rules regarding the treatment of hospital staff were first laid out here too, which would greatly influence what would be implemented on hospital ships, as well as the quality of life on board. In the American Civil War, the Federal Navy captured a Confederate quote-unquote warship and created the United States' first dedicated hospital ship, treating soldiers for both sides. The USS Red Rover would service the wounded around Missouri, mostly up and down the Mississippi River. In 1877, the British sent a hospital ship to service the wounded of the Russo-Turkish War. This time, the vessel was equipped with a dedicated operating room, chloroform, and carbolic acid. Modern medicine was finally getting some use. Not like when they diagnose you with some made-up flu, then tell you smoking crack would help. The 1800s, ladies and gentlemen. It was a better time. By the Spanish-American War in 1898, hospital ships were in use by both sides, now functioning as dedicated treatment facilities, not just transportation. By World War I, this is where the fun begins. You see, hospital ships in the past were rarely constructed as hospital ships from the beginning. Usually, outdated merchant vessels or old steamers were converted for short-term wars of a few years, expecting to be scrapped after. This practice sort of continued into the First World War, and ships like the Britannic and Aquitania were requisitioned for service by the British Admiralty. The process of conversion involved painting them up, but also clearing out major halls, corridors, and sometimes even taking down walls to make room for operating theaters, massive sleeping quarters, and storage facilities. Now, the First Geneva Convention laid the foundation for the Second Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention in 1907, which made some big new rules, most relevant of which is the rules around hospital ships. The official profile of hospital ships was designated, as well as the most fundamental guidelines for their function. They can't be used to transport weapons, ammunition, or troops, and they must service men from both sides of the conflict. They must also clearly distinguish themselves from a warship with this rockin' symbol, an inverted Swiss flag, or as we know it, the Red Cross. It wasn't exactly a new symbol then. I don't really know why I'm making a deal out of it. The benefit of hospital ship status was that it formally became a war crime to attack the vessels, although inspection by the enemy was allowed as well as taking them as POWs. Overall, hospital ships would prove crucial in both world wars. Now, if you're like me, you'll understand this a little bit better, but while going through my research, I stumbled across one of the saddest Wikipedia articles I've ever seen. List of hospital ships sunk in World War I. Now, I really shouldn't have to explain myself on this one, because if you're watching this video, that means we have at least a somewhat similar thought process. But think of it like this. When you scroll through this list, most of these ships were loaded with wounded men tormented by immense physical and emotional agony, only to slowly die in the black oceanic abyss. You feel good about yourself, Kaiser Willie? Oh, and there's one for World War II as well. War crimes galore. Now, some of these sunk vessels were fortunate enough to have been lost with few casualties, like the HMHS Britannic. Others weren't so lucky. In 1918, the Royal Navy had 77 hospital ships in service. That's 77 too many to Kaiser Wilhelm II, though. When Germany declared unrestricted submarine warfare, they essentially gave the Kaiserliche Marine free range to sink any hospital ship for any reason. In World War II, the US of A got in on it with their Comfort class of hospital ships, the USS Comfort, USS Mercy, and USS Hope. These were still primarily used as transport for the wounded after care had been administered, however. It seems America still hadn't gotten with the program. These vessels operated in the Pacific Theater exclusively, and had short 3-year-long terms. The USS Comfort was hit by a kamikaze attack while en route to Okinawa, killing 28 on board, many of whom were patients. You feel good about yourself, Emperor Hirohito? The Haven class of US ships also serviced the wounded through late World War II, the Korean War, and even Vietnam. The USS Sanctuary, although decommissioned in 1975, wasn't scrapped until 2011. The 1949 Geneva Convention added a little on to hospital ship protocol, mostly adding specifications. It recommended that red crosses be added to the tops of ships as well, mostly for planes to identify them so accidental aerial bombings wouldn't be a problem. Not like you would know anything about that, right, Japan? Today, the US Navy has the USNS Comfort and the USNS Mercy, known for going to LA during the pandemic. Today, they are outdated and will probably be replaced soon, but still cool, I guess. That's one of the reasons I wanted to make a video on hospital ships. You know, honor their legacy in whatever way I can. Well, that's all I got for you. What did we learn? Hospital ships are neat little pieces of military history, and although a more recent creation, they prove to be invaluable in combat, as long as the Kaiser doesn't have anything to say about it.